In the vast emptiness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a universal truth that even the most advanced species whisper about in their darkest moments. When humanity stands beside you, death itself hesitates. The Corvani Empire learned this lesson when their homeworld burned. The crystalline Zephyrians discovered it when their ancient wisdom failed them. And now, as the shadow of an unstoppable cosmic horror stretches across the galaxy, devouring entire star systems and leaving nothing but void in its wake, every species that has ever called humanity primitive or reckless finds themselves hoping for one thing: that when the final battle comes, they'll have earned the right to stand shoulder to shoulder with the mad, brilliant, impossibly stubborn apes from Earth who somehow always find a way to make terror itself afraid. This is not a story about humanity saving the galaxy. This is a story about humanity teaching the galaxy how to save itself. One desperate stand, one impossible victory, one shared sacrifice at a time. Because when the universe's greatest nightmare finally meets its match, it won't be because of superior technology or ancient wisdom. It will be because humanity taught everyone else the one thing they never learned: how to fight like you have something worth dying for. The emergency beacon screamed across 12 different frequencies as the Corvani science vessel Bright Edge tumbled through space, its hull cracked like an eggshell and atmosphere bleeding into the void. Commander Zexka pressed her scaled hand against the bridge's viewing port, watching helplessly as her crew sealed themselves into escape pods. Behind them, where the research station Kepler 442b had been studying dimensional anomalies for the past 3 cycles, there was nothing. Not debris, not radiation, just an absence that seemed to pull at the light around it. "Mayday, mayday," she transmitted on all channels, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. "This is Corvani vessel Bright Edge. We have encountered an unknown entity. Kepler Station is gone. Repeat, Kepler Station has been completely destroyed. Warning all ships to..." The transmission died as another shockwave hit the ship, throwing Zexka against the bulkhead. Emergency lighting flickered as systems failed one by one. Through the chaos, she heard her science officer's panicked voice over the commander. "The entity is moving. It's heading toward the Proxima trade routes." Zexka's blood went cold. Proxima housed over 6 billion souls across 4 different species. If this thing reached populated space, distance to the nearest patrol fleet, she demanded, pulling herself back to the command chair. 17 hours at maximum burn, Commander. But at this rate of expansion, they both knew it would be too late. The thing, whatever it was, had consumed a space station the size of a small city in minutes. By the time help arrived, entire worlds might be gone. That's when the new signal cut through their emergency frequency. Crisp, clear, and speaking in perfectly accented Corvani standard. "Corvani vessel Bright Edge. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Ship Indomitable. We're reading your distress call. What's your status?" Zexka stared at the communications panel in disbelief. "Umans. Out here." The nearest human colony was 8 light years away, and their ships were notoriously slow compared to modern galactic standards. "How they gotten here so quickly?" "Human vessel," she responded. "This is Commander Zexka. We've lost primary power and have multiple hull breaches. But that's not the immediate problem. There's an entity of unknown origin that has already destroyed Kepler Station. You need to stay away and warn ma'am." The human captain interrupted politely but firmly. "With respect, we're not leaving anyone behind. We're already en route to your position. ETA 4 minutes. Can you maintain life support that long?" "Captain Chun, you don't understand. This entity destroyed a Class A research station in under 10 minutes. Your ship will handle whatever comes our way," Chun said with the kind of casual confidence that Zexka had learned to associate with humans. It should have been arrogant. Instead, it was oddly comforting. "Just focus on keeping your people alive. We got the rest." 3 minutes later, Zexka watched in amazement as the human ship dropped out of hyperspace less than a kilometer from her position. The Indomitable wasn't particularly large by galactic standards, maybe 800 meters long, but there was something about its design that suggested it had been built for war rather than exploration. Angular armor plating covered a hull bristling with weapons systems, and even as she watched, she could see small craft launching from its base. Asterisk bright edge asterisk. This is Rescue Team Alpha. Came a new voice, younger and more informal than the captain's. We're coming alongside to evacuate your crew. How many souls aboard? 43, Zexkar replied, watching the human rescue shuttles maneuver with practiced precision. But, Captain Chun, you need to... Commander! Chen's voice cut through again, and this time there was steel beneath the politeness. I understand your concern, but we're not abandoning you or anyone else to whatever that thing is. My science officer is already analyzing your sensor data. We'll figure this out together. The first shuttle docked with a gentle bump that somehow felt reassuring. Zexka found herself moving toward the airlock, drawn by something she couldn't quite identify. When the seal cycled and the hatch opened, she got her first close look at humans in action. The rescue team moved like water, flowing around obstacles and coordinating without seeming to communicate. Their leader, a compact woman with short dark hair and eyes that missed nothing, approached with her hands visible but ready. Commander Zechka, Lieutenant Rodriguez, search and rescue. We'll have your people out of here in under 10 minutes. Any critical wounded? 3 crew members in medical, but they're stable, Zexkar replied, surprised by how quickly she felt herself trusting this stranger. There was something about the way humans carried themselves, not arrogant, but absolutely certain that they would handle whatever came their way. As her crew filed onto the human shuttles, Zexka found herself on the bridge of the Indomitable 15 minutes later, watching Captain Chun study the sensor readings with an intensity that reminded her of a predator tracking prey. Chun was younger than Zexka had expected, maybe early 30s by human standards, with black hair pulled back in a regulation bun and scars on her hands that spoke of previous battles. She stood before a holographic display showing the area where Kepler Station had been, occasionally asking questions of her officers in rapid English before returning to Corvani standard. Your station was studying dimensional anomalies, Chin said without looking up. Any chance they found what they were looking for? The research was classified, Zexka began, then stopped. What did classification matter now? They were investigating reports of space-time distortions. Some theorists believed they might be natural wormholes to parallel dimensions. Looks like they found something, muttered Chin's science officer, a tall man with prematurely gray hair. Captain, these readings don't make sense. Whatever consumed the station isn't showing up as matter or energy. It's like negative space, a hole in reality itself. Chin nodded grimly. How fast is it moving? Current velocity suggests it will reach the Proxima system in 18 hours, the officer replied. At which point, he didn't need to finish. Everyone on the bridge knew what that meant. Captain, Zexka said quietly, with respect to your rescue of my crew, I suggest you contact Galactic Command immediately and then withdraw to minimum safe distance. This is beyond what any single ship can handle. Chen finally looked up from the displays, and Zexka was struck by the absolute lack of fear in her eyes. Not the absence of understanding. She clearly grasped the magnitude of the threat, but the complete absence of the paralysis that should have come with such understanding. Commander, how long has the Corvani Empire existed? The question caught Zexka off guard. 8,000 years. Give or take a few centuries. What? And in all that time, how many existential threats have you faced? Real ones, I mean. Things that could have ended your entire civilization. Zexka thought for a moment. Perhaps 3? The Great Plague 4 millennia ago, the quantum storm of the Third Era, and the Mechanist Uprising. Humanity is barely 400 years into space, Chin said conversationally, turning back to the displays. We've faced 17 existential threats in that time, not counting the dozen or so we created for ourselves. Do you know what we learned from all of that, Commander? What? Chun smiled, And there's something both terrifying and oddly comforting about that expression. We learned that there's no such thing as an impossible situation. There are just situations that require impossible solutions. Captain Chun, the communications officer, called out, "I'm reading multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Long-range scans suggest a lot of them." The main display shifted to show the tactical situation. Red dots began appearing around the anomaly, first dozens, then hundreds. Ship signatures from across the galaxy. Corvani battle cruisers, Zephyrian crystal ships, Takaran destroyers, even a few vessels from species Zexka didn't immediately recognize. "It appears word has spread," Chen observed calmly. "Commander, do you recognize that formation?" Zexka studied the display and felt her stomach sink. "That's the Galactic Defense Fleet. The entire fleet. They're preparing for a containment bombardment, which means they're planning to try to destroy it with overwhelming firepower," Chun mused. "What do you think their chances are? Against something that consumed a research station in minutes? Minimal at best. But it's the only option they have." "No," Chun said quietly. "It's the only option they know about." Before Zexka could ask what she meant, the tactical officer spoke up. "Captain, Admiral Vextar is hailing us. He's not pleased that we're here." The main screen shifted to show the bridge of the Corvani flagship. Admiral Vextar, his scales bearing the deep blue of advanced age and authority, glared at them with obvious displeasure. "Human captain," he began without preamble, "you are ordered to withdraw immediately from this area. This is a galactic defense operation, and your presence is neither requested nor required." Chun straightened but didn't back down. "Admiral, with respect, we have rescued survivors from the initial attack and gathered valuable sensor data. We believe we can assist. Negative. Humanity's contributions to galactic affairs are noted and appreciated, but this situation requires resources and capabilities beyond what your species possesses. Withdraw immediately." Zexka watched Chin's jaw tighten slightly, but her voice remained perfectly professional. "Admiral, I've transmitted our sensor analysis to the fleet. Have your science officers had time to review it?" "They have. Their conclusion is that conventional weapons will be sufficient to contain this threat. And if they're wrong, then we will adapt. But Earth has no stake in this fight. The entity appears to be targeting the inner galactic regions. Your outer colonies are safe." Chin was quiet for a long moment, studying something on her command display. Then she looked up at the Admiral with an expression that Zexka couldn't quite read. "Admiral, how many crew members are aboard the ships in your fleet?" The question seemed to surprise Vextar. "Approximately 4 million souls." "What bearing does this have?" "Just wanted to know how many people I'd be abandoning if I followed your orders." The bridge went very quiet. Even the background hum of systems seemed to fade. "Captain Chun," Vextar said slowly, "you seem to misunderstand the situation. This is not a human problem." "Admiral," Chun replied, her voice carrying a weight that made everyone on both bridges lean forward. "4 million people are about to face something that might kill them all. That makes it a human problem." She cut the transmission before Vextar could respond and turned to her crew. "All right, people. Time to earn our pay. Science, I want everything we know about this entity analyzed and reanalyzed. Look for patterns, weaknesses, anything that doesn't fit standard physics. Tactical, start running simulations on unconventional approaches. And communications." She paused, looking thoughtful. "Yes, Captain." "Send a message to Earth Command. Full tactical briefing, all our sensor data, and a request for any theoretical work on parallel dimensional entities. If we're going to solve this thing, we're going to need some very smart people thinking very hard about very impossible things." Zexka stepped forward. "Captain, the fleet has over 4,000 ships. They're some of the most advanced vessels in the galaxy. If they can't stop this thing..." Chun turned to look at her, and again Zexka was struck by the complete absence of doubt in her expression. "Commander, in my experience, advanced and effective aren't always the same thing. Sometimes the solution isn't about having the biggest gun or the fastest ship. Sometimes it's about having the right perspective on an impossible problem. And you believe humanity has that perspective? Chun smiled again, but this time it wasn't comforting. It was the smile of someone who had looked into the abyss and decided the abyss needed to blink first. Commander, we're the species that looked at the vacuum of space and decided it was a highway. We saw worlds covered in poison gas and decided they were future vacation spots. We encountered faster-than-light travel by accidentally breaking the laws of physics and then pretending we'd meant to do it all along. She gestured toward the display, showing the entity that impossible absence of space and time that had consumed Kepler Station. This thing thinks it's the ultimate predator. It thinks nothing in this universe can challenge it. But it's never met a species that specialized in making impossible things look easy. The tactical officer looked up from his displays. Captain, the fleet is beginning their approach. Admiral Vextar is requesting all non-combat vessels withdraw to minimum safe distance. And our response? Sir, Chen's smile widened slightly. We're not a non-combat vessel, Lieutenant. We're a human vessel. There's a difference. As the Indomitable moved closer to the anomaly alongside the massive galactic fleet, Zexka found herself caught between terror and fascination. She had served with many species over her decades in space, but she had never encountered anything quite like humanity's approach to impossible situations. They didn't ignore the danger. The preparations were thorough and professional. They didn't pretend they had all the answers. Their questions were pointed and practical. But somehow, they also didn't seem to accept that the situation was hopeless. It was, Zexka realized, like watching someone approach a mathematical proof not by trying to solve it, but by questioning whether the underlying assumptions were correct in the first place. Captain, the science officer called out, I'm seeing some interesting patterns in the sensor data. The entity isn't expanding uniformly. There are fluctuations in its boundaries, almost like it's feeding. Chun finished. And if it's feeding, it might get full. Zexka breathed, understanding dawning. Or at least pause between meals. Exactly. Science. Map those fluctuations. I want to know if there's a pattern, a rhythm, anything that suggests we might be able to predict its behavior. As the fleet formed up around the anomaly, weapons charging and targeting systems locking on, Chun stood quietly studying the displays. Around her, her crew worked with efficient precision, but Zexka noticed that none of them seemed particularly worried about the outcome. It wasn't overconfidence, she realized. It was something else entirely. They genuinely seemed to believe that every problem had a solution, and that their job was simply to find it. Fleet approaching optimal firing range, the tactical officer reported. Any word from our science teams? Still working, Captain. But Dr. Martinez thinks he's identified a temporal component to the entity's structure. It might not be entirely present in our dimension. Chen nodded, which might explain why conventional weapons won't work. You can't shoot something that's only partially here. The communications officer looked up from her station. Captain, Admiral Vextar is requesting our immediate withdrawal. The bombardment begins in 2 minutes. Chun studied the tactical display for another moment, then made a decision that would be remembered throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Negative. Signal the fleet that we're going to try something different. And if it doesn't work, she paused, looking around the bridge at her crew, at Zexka, at the impossible situation they faced together. Well, if it doesn't work, at least we'll have tried something impossible. The first volley from the Galactic Defense fleet lit up space like a newborn star. Thousands of energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and exotic particle weapons converged on the anomaly where Kepler Station had been. For a brief, hopeful moment, the combined firepower of the galaxy's greatest military force painted the void in brilliant colors. Then, the light faded, and the entity remained unchanged. Worse, it had grown larger. Admiral, came a panicked voice over the fleet communications. The entity appears to be feeding on the energy discharges. It's expanded by 12% since the bombardment began. Commander Zexka watched Admiral Vextar's expression on the main display shift from confidence to confusion to dawning horror. In the background of his bridge, she could hear officers calling out increasingly desperate readings. "All ships, cease fire." Vextar ordered, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Repeat, all ships cease fire immediately." But it was too late. The entity pulsed once, a ripple of absolute darkness that spread outward like a stone dropped in still water. Where the pulse passed, space itself seemed to bend. Several smaller ships on the fleet's perimeter simply vanished, not destroyed but erased, as if they had never existed at all. "Captain Chun," Vextar's voice carried across the communication channel, no longer demanding, but pleading, "Do you have any recommendations?" Captain Sarah Chun stood quietly for a moment, studying the sensor readings that showed the entity now 3 times larger than when they'd arrived. When she spoke, her voice was calm and thoughtful. "Admiral, I'd like permission to try a different approach. Something that definitely falls under the category of impossible solutions. At this point, Captain, I'm open to any suggestions." Chun turned to her science officer. "Dr. Martinez, what's the status on your dimensional analysis?" The graying scientist looked up from his displays, excitement warring with uncertainty on his face. "Captain, this is completely theoretical, but I think I understand what we're dealing with. The entity isn't just feeding on energy. It's feeding on the fabric of space-time itself. Every time we hit it with conventional weapons, we're essentially giving it more reality to consume. Can you explain that in terms the rest of us can understand?" Chen asked. "Imagine our universe as a piece of cloth," Martinez said, gesturing toward the holographic display. "This entity is like a hole in that cloth, but a hole that can grow by eating the threads around it. Every time we shoot at it, we're just giving it more threads to consume." Zexka felt her scales ripple with nervous energy. "Then how do we stop it?" "You don't stop a hole," Chun said slowly, understanding dawning in her voice. "You patch it." "Captain." Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had rescued Zexka's crew, looked confused. Chun began pacing, the way humans did when they were thinking through impossible problems. "Dr. Martinez, in your theoretical models, what would happen if instead of attacking the entity directly, we tried to reinforce the space around it?" "Reinforce space-time?" Martinez's eyes widened. "That would require?" "Captain, that would require us to essentially weave new reality around the whole. The energy requirements alone would be impossible with conventional technology," Chen finished. "But we're not exactly conventional, are we?" She turned to the tactical officer. "Lieutenant Park, I need you to run a simulation. What would happen if we linked the power cores of every ship in this fleet and channeled them through our quantum resonance array?" Park's fingers flew over his console for several minutes before he looked up, his face pale. "Captain, the energy output would be sufficient, but there's no way to control that much power. It would tear our ship apart in seconds. Unless," Dr. Martinez said slowly, "unless we used organic neural networks to modulate the flow." "Captain, are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" Chen's smile returned, that same expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and terrifying. "Dr. Martinez, I'm thinking that this entity has never encountered a species that believes in turning impossible problems into impossible solutions." She opened a channel to the fleet. "Admiral Vextar, all ships, this is Captain Chun. I'm transmitting a tactical plan that my crew has developed. It's completely untested, highly dangerous, and will require perfect coordination from every ship in the fleet." "What are you proposing, Captain?" "We're going to fix space-time." The silence that followed was profound enough that Zexka could hear her own heartbeat. "Captain Chun," Vextar said finally, "perhaps you could elaborate?" "The entity is a hole in reality that feeds by consuming more reality around it. Instead of trying to destroy it, we're going to give it the one thing it can't consume, more reality than it can handle. We're going to patch the hole by weaving new space-time around it until it's contained." "And how exactly do you propose to weave space-time?" Chen gestured to Dr. Martinez, who began transmitting technical specifications to the fleet. Every ship in the fleet will link their power cores and channel the combined energy through the Indomitable's quantum resonance array. The array will modulate the energy using human neural patterns to create localized space-time distortions that will essentially sew reality back together around the entity. Human neural patterns? This came from the Zephyrian crystal ship Harmony of Ages, its captain speaking in the musical tones of her species. Why specifically human? Because, Chen said simply, humans are really good at holding contradictory ideas in their heads simultaneously. Most species think in logical patterns. A leads to B leads to C. Human brains are wired to accept that A can lead to B and Z at the same time, depending on context. That cognitive flexibility is exactly what we need to modulate quantum probability fields. Zexka stared at the human captain. You're proposing to use the illogical nature of human thought as a quantum computing system. I'm proposing to use the adaptive nature of human consciousness as a universal translator between theoretical physics and practical application, Chun corrected. Every human on my ship will link into the array, and our combined cognitive patterns will serve as the control system for reality manipulation. The Takaran destroyer captain's voice carried the deep rumble of his species. Captain Chun, what you're describing has never been attempted. The theoretical foundation alone has been worked out by human physicists for the last 2 centuries, Chun interrupted. We've just never had a reason to try it before, or the power requirements. Admiral Vexstar's image leaned forward on screen. Captain, what are the chances of success? Chun looked around her bridge, meeting the eyes of each of her crew members. Zexka watched their faces, seeing determination but no fear, confidence but no arrogance. Admiral, honestly, I have no idea, but I can tell you the chances if we don't try. And those are 0. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. What do you need from the fleet? Every ship needs to form a spherical formation around the entity, exactly 47.3 kilometers from its current boundary. Each ship links their power core to their neighbors using standard emergency power transfer protocols. When the array activates, everyone needs to channel everything they have through the Indomitable, and then trust us to not blow up the galaxy. How long do you need to prepare? Chen looked to Dr. Martinez, who is already deep in calculations with the ship's computer systems. 40 minutes to calibrate the array and establish neural linkages. After that, the actual process should take about 12 minutes. We've never done this before, Admiral, but humans have a saying, nothing ventured, nothing gained. As the fleet began repositioning according to Chen's specifications, Zexka found herself fascinated by the human crew's preparations. They moved with the same efficient calm she'd observed during the rescue. But now she could see something else underneath, a kind of excited anticipation, as if they were genuinely looking forward to attempting something that should have been impossible. Commander, Chun said, approaching her station, I should mention that this process is going to put significant strain on anyone present during the neural linkage. If you'd prefer to transfer to one of the other ships. Captain, Zexka said firmly, I've watched your species work for the last several hours. If you're about to attempt the impossible, I want to witness it firsthand. Chen nodded respectfully. In that case, you might want to understand what you're about to see. Dr. Martinez, can you explain the neural linkage process? The science officer looked up from his preparations. Commander Zexka, we're going to link the consciousness of every human on this ship into a single cognitive network. That network will then interface directly with quantum probability fields to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality. And what will that look like? Honestly, we have no idea. Human consciousness interacting directly with the quantum substrate of the universe has never been attempted. It could be beautiful, terrifying, or completely incomprehensible. Zexka felt a chill run down her spine. And you're all willing to risk your sanity for this? Commander, Chen said quietly, we're willing to risk our sanity for 4 million people we've never met. That's just how humans work. The preparations continued with mechanical precision. Throughout the ship, crew members took positions at neural interface stations, their expressions serious but determined. Zexcon noticed that they spoke to each other with casual affection, making jokes and offering encouragement as if they were preparing for a routine mission rather than an unprecedented manipulation of reality itself. Fleet reports ready for power transfer, Lieutenant Park announced. Neural networks showing green across the board, Dr. Martinez added. Admiral Vextar, Chun said over the communication channel, we're ready to begin. Once we start, there won't be any way to stop the process. Are all ships prepared? All ships report ready, Captain. The fleet is in your hands. Chun took her position at the central neural interface, a complex array of quantum sensors and cognitive monitors that would serve as a focal point for the linkage. As she placed her hands on the interface contacts, Zexka saw something shift in her expression. The calm confidence remained, but underneath it was something else, a deep, abiding love for the people she was trying to protect. All right, people, Chin said to her crew. Let's show the universe what humans can do when we put our minds together. The neural linkage activated with a sound like reality itself, taking a deep breath. Suddenly, the bridge was filled with a presence that Zexka could only describe as profoundly human. Curious, determined, compassionate, and absolutely unafraid of the impossible. Through the main display, she watched as the combined power of the entire Galactic Defense Fleet flowed into the Indomitable's quantum resonance array. The energy levels were astronomical, enough to power entire star systems, but somehow the human neural network was containing and directing it with impossible precision. And then the real work began. Reality around the entity began to shift. Space-time itself became visible as shimmering threads of probability and causation, weaving together in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The entity, sensing what was happening, pulsed with malevolent hunger, reaching out to consume this new source of reality to feed upon. But the human network was faster, more adaptable, more creatively unpredictable than anything the entity had encountered before. Where it reached out with tentacles of pure negation, the linked human consciousness responded with bursts of possibility, probability, and potential that filled the gaps in space-time faster than they could be consumed. Neural stress levels climbing. Dr. Martinez reported, his voice strained but steady. All systems nominal. Through the linkage, Zexka could sense the incredible mental effort required to maintain the process. The human crew wasn't just controlling the energy flow. They were actively thinking new reality into existence, using their combined imagination to literally weave space and time back together. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing she had ever witnessed. Entity attempting to adapt, Lieutenant Park called out. It's trying to feed on the new space-time structures. Let it try. Chin's voice carried the combined will of every human on the ship. We can think faster than it can eat. And they could. Every time the entity found a way to consume part of their work, the human network simply thought of something new, some different approach, some unexpected solution that forced the entity to adapt again. It was like watching a cosmic game of chess where one player could change the rules of the game every few moves. Gradually, inexorably, the hole in reality began to shrink. The entity fought back with increasing desperation, but it was facing something it had never encountered before, a species that specialized in making the impossible look routine. Reality structure stabilizing, Dr. Martinez announced. Entity contained and shrinking. Through the display, Zexka watched as the last vestiges of the entity were sealed away behind layers of reinforced space-time, contained within a quantum bubble that would prevent it from ever feeding again. Neural linkage disengaging, Chen announced, and suddenly the bridge felt empty, as if something essential had departed. The captain slumped slightly in her chair, exhausted but triumphant. Around the bridge, crew members began checking systems and monitoring the results of their impossible achievement. Admiral, Chan said into the communication channel, the entity is contained. Repeat, the threat has been neutralized. The response was a cheer that echoed across every ship in the fleet, a sound of pure relief and amazement from 4 million souls who had just been saved by something that should never have worked. Captain Chun, Admiral Vextar's voice carried a note of profound respect. On behalf of the Galactic Defense Fleet and every world that would have been threatened by this entity, I thank you. What you've accomplished here is what any species would do, Admiral, Chun replied quietly. We just happen to be the ones with the right kind of crazy to make it work. As the fleet began to disperse, Zexka found herself studying the human crew with new understanding. They had just accomplished something that violated every known law of physics, casually rewritten the fundamental structure of reality, and saved millions of lives. And they were already making plans for lunch. 3 months after the Kepler incident, as the galactic media had dubbed it, Commander Zexka stood in the observation deck of the diplomatic station Concordia, watching ships from across the galaxy arrive for what many were calling the most important gathering in galactic history. The formal name was the Emergency Council on Dimensional Threats, but everyone knew what it really was, an acknowledgement that the old ways of thinking about impossible problems were no longer sufficient. The human delegation had arrived that morning aboard the same ship that had saved her life, the Indomitable. Captain Sarah Chun had been promoted to Admiral, a rank that came with authority over humanity's new deep space crisis response fleet. The irony wasn't lost on Zexka that the youngest spacefaring species in the galaxy had just been given responsibility for handling threats that might end all spacefaring species. Commander, a voice said behind her, and she turned to see Chun approaching with that same calm confidence that had characterized every interaction they'd had. Admiral, now I suppose I should say, congratulations. Thank you, Chun replied, joining her at the observation port. Though I have to admit, the promotion came with a lot of paperwork I wasn't expecting. Apparently, creating new physics requires new regulations. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the controlled chaos of ships docking and delegates arriving. Representatives from over 200 species had come to participate in discussions that would reshape how the galaxy approached existential threats. I've been thinking about what happened, Zexka said finally. About what made it possible. Oh, it wasn't just the technology or the power from the fleet or even the neural linkage, Zexka continued. It was something else. Something specifically human. Chun waited, clearly interested in her perspective. Your species doesn't accept that problems can't be solved, Zexka said. Every other species in the galaxy has learned to recognize when a situation is hopeless and retreat to minimize losses. You've learned to recognize when a situation is hopeless and start looking for creative solutions. I'm not sure that makes us special, Chun said thoughtfully. Maybe just stubborn. Admiral Chun, Zexka said seriously. In the last 3 months, 7 different species have approached the Corvani Empire asking for advice on how to think like humans. The Zephyrians are restructuring their entire educational system around what they call cognitive flexibility training. The Takarans have started teaching their children to question fundamental assumptions as a regular part of their curriculum. Chun looked surprised. Really? What you did at Kepler wasn't just save 4 million lives. You taught the galaxy that impossible situations require impossible thinking. Before Chun could respond, both of their communication devices chimed with an urgent message. They exchanged glances and activated their displays simultaneously. The message was brief but alarming. Priority Alpha emergency. Multiple dimensional incursions detected in the outer rim. Entity signatures match Kepler class. All crisis response assets report immediately. Multiple entities? Chun said quietly, her mind already shifting into crisis mode. How many is multiple? Zexka's display showed additional details. 17 confirmed, possibly more. They're appearing simultaneously across a 3-sector area. Admiral, this isn't random. No, Chun agreed, it's not. Someone or something is deliberately releasing these entities into our dimension. Within minutes, they were aboard the Indomitable, racing toward the bridge as Chen's crew prepared for emergency deployment. The ship launched from Concordia with a precision that spoke of constant readiness, accompanied by the mixed fleet that now made up humanity's crisis response force. Human vessels working alongside volunteer ships from dozens of other species. "Report," Chen demanded as she took the captain's chair. 17 confirmed dimensional entities, each one approximately the same size and composition as the Kepler entity, Dr. Martinez announced from the science station. They're positioned in a roughly spherical pattern around the galactic core, approximately 800 light-years from the center. Distance from the nearest inhabited systems? The closest entity is 4 hours from the Proxima colonies. The farthest is 6 hours from Zephyrian space. Chen studied the tactical display, her expression grim. If they all start moving toward populated space simultaneously, we couldn't handle them all, Lieutenant Park finished from the tactical station. Even with the new fleet composition and the improved neural linking technology, we can maybe handle 3 or 4 at once. 17 is impossible, Chun said, but there was something in her voice that made everyone on the bridge look up. Which means we need an impossible solution. Admiral, the communications officer announced, priority message from the Emergency Council. They're asking for your assessment of the situation. Chun activated the communication channel, connecting her to the gathered representatives of the galactic community. The main display showed the council chamber aboard Concordia, where delegates from hundreds of species waited for her report. "Council members," Chun began, "the situation is significantly worse than our initial reports indicated. Based on the positioning and timing of these incursions, we're not dealing with random dimensional tiers. This is a coordinated attack." A ripple of concern passed through the council chamber. Furthermore, Chun continued, the scale of the attack suggests that whoever is behind this knows about our success at Kepler and has specifically designed this scenario to overwhelm our response capabilities. Admiral Chun, the council speaker, an elderly Corvani diplomat, said formally, "What are your recommendations?" Chun looked around her bridge, meeting the eyes of her crew before answering. "Honestly, I recommend that every species capable of space travel begin immediate evacuation procedures for all populated systems within 50 light-years of the entity positions." The council chamber erupted in concerned voices. "Admiral," the Zephyrian representative called out, "are you saying the situation is hopeless?" Chen's smile returned, that expression that had become legendary throughout the galaxy. "No, Counselor, I'm saying the situation is impossible, which means we need to stop thinking about this as a military problem and start thinking about it as a human problem." "I don't understand the distinction," the Takaran representative rumbled. "The distinction," Chen said, her voice carrying to every corner of the council chamber, "is that military thinking looks for ways to win fights. Human thinking looks for ways to make fights unnecessary." Dr. Martinez looked up from his station. "Admiral, I'm reading something interesting in the entity positioning data. If I plot their locations and extrapolate their eventual movement patterns." He transferred his analysis to the main display, showing the galaxy with 17 red dots arranged in a perfect sphere around the galactic core. "They're not randomly positioned," Chen observed. "They're forming a containment field." "Containing what?" Zexka asked. The answer came from an unexpected source, the ship's artificial intelligence system, which rarely spoke unless directly addressed. "Admiral," the AI said in its characteristically neutral tone, "based on the positioning data and historical dimensional research, the entities appear to be positioned to prevent something from leaving the galactic core region." Chun straightened in her chair. "Computer, elaborate." "The 17 entities are positioned at optimal coordinates to create a dimensional barrier around the galactic core. Such a barrier would prevent any form of faster-than-light travel or dimensional manipulation within the contained area." "They're not trying to invade the galaxy," Chin said slowly. "They're trying to quarantine something in the galactic core." Dr. Martinez was already running new scans. "Admiral, if the AI is correct, then these entities aren't our enemies. They're prison guards? But prison guards for what?" The answer came in the form of a new sensor alert. Deep in the galactic core, something was moving. Something vast, ancient, and radiating power signatures that made the dimensional entities look like flickering candles in comparison. My God, Dr. Martinez whispered. Admiral, I'm reading massive dimensional disturbances in the galactic core. Something is trying to break through into our reality, and it's enormous. Chun stood up, pacing as she processed this new information. So we have 17 dimensional entities trying to contain something in the galactic core that wants to get out. And if it succeeds, based on the power readings, the AI said, the entity in the galactic core possesses sufficient energy to destabilize the fundamental structure of this dimension. Release would likely result in universal collapse. The council chamber had gone completely silent. Admiral Chun, the council speaker said quietly, what are you proposing? Chun looked around her bridge again, seeing the same determination in her crew's faces that she felt in her own heart. I'm proposing that we do something no one has ever done before. Instead of fighting the 17 entities, we help them. Help them. We help them strengthen their containment field. We work with them to make sure whatever is in the galactic core stays there. And how exactly do we communicate with entities that consume reality? The Takaran representative asked. The same way we communicate with anyone, Chen replied. We find common ground. They want to contain something that threatens the universe. We want to protect the universe. That's enough to start with. Admiral, Dr. Martinez said urgently, I'm reading massive power fluctuations from the galactic core. Whatever's down, there's making another attempt to break free. Chun made a decision that would be studied by xenopsychologists for centuries to come. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. We're going to attempt something that has never been tried before. We're going to offer our assistance to entities that we previously considered hostile. She opened a broad-spectrum communication channel, broadcasting toward the nearest dimensional entity. To the entity designated Kepler 1, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Forces. We have analyzed your positioning and believe we understand your purpose. We wish to offer assistance in maintaining your containment field. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, space itself seemed to pulse, and a voice spoke directly into the minds of everyone aboard the Indomitable. It was vast, ancient, and utterly alien, but somehow they could understand it. Small meat thoughts, the voice said. You offer aid to the Watchers? Your kind is new, weak, fragile. Why? Because, Chen replied, speaking aloud to something that communicated through pure thought. Our kind believes that when the universe is threatened, everyone has to help, no matter how small, weak, or fragile they are. The sleeper in the deep stirs, the entity continued. It seeks to devour all reality existence. The Watchers have contained it for billions of your time cycles. But it grows stronger while we grow fewer. Then, let us help you grow stronger, Chun said simply. What followed was the most extraordinary collaboration in galactic history. Working together, the ships of the Crisis Response Fleet and the 17-dimensional entities began to weave new layers of containment around the galactic core. Human cognitive flexibility proved essential in modulating the reality manipulation fields, while the vast knowledge and power of the Watchers provided the foundation for barriers that could contain cosmic-level threats. For 6 days, the combined force worked tirelessly, strengthening containment fields that had held for eons, but were beginning to fail. Ships from across the galaxy joined the effort, each contributing their unique capabilities to the unprecedented cooperation between organic and dimensional intelligence. On the 7th day, the disturbances from the galactic core ceased. The sleeper returns to deep dream death. The Watcher entity communicated. The barriers hold for another age span. Small meat thoughts have proven adequate allies. Thank you, Chen replied. If you ever need assistance again, the Watchers will remember human flexibility strength. When next the universe requires impossible solutions, we will call upon the species that teaches others to think beyond thought limits. As the Crisis Response Fleet returned to normal space, Zexka found herself once again on the bridge of the Indomitable. watching Admiral Chen coordinate the safe return of ships from dozens of species. You realize what you've accomplished, don't you? Zexka said quietly. We helped prevent the end of the universe, Chen replied matter-of-factly. It seemed like the right thing to do. No, I admitted. You taught the galaxy that cooperation is possible even with beings that exist beyond our understanding. You've changed how every species thinks about the impossible. Chen considered this for a moment. Maybe that's the real human contribution to the galaxy. Not that we can solve impossible problems, but that we refuse to accept that any problem is truly impossible if enough people work together to solve it. Even people who aren't technically people, especially those, Chen said with that familiar smile. After all, the universe is a very big place. If we're going to keep it safe, we need all the help we can get. Years later, when historians of a dozen species wrote about this period, they would call it the Great Awakening, the time when the galaxy learned that the universe was both more dangerous and more full of possibilities than anyone had imagined. Schools throughout civilized space began teaching courses on human-style problem-solving, which emphasized creative thinking, cooperative solutions, and the radical idea that impossible situations simply required impossible amounts of imagination. The crisis response fleet grew into the Galactic Defense Corps, with human officers training crews from hundreds of species in the art of thinking beyond conventional limits. The Watchers became regular consultants on dimensional threats, their ancient wisdom now augmented by human adaptability. And somewhere in the outer reaches of the galaxy, where new species were just beginning to discover faster-than-light travel, they would occasionally receive visits from ships bearing crews of mixed species, all trained in the revolutionary concept that no matter how small, weak, or fragile they might be, they had something valuable to contribute to protecting the universe. Because humanity had taught the galaxy the most important lesson of all, that when people stand shoulder to shoulder, terror itself learns to be afraid. The universe was vast, dangerous, and full of impossible challenges. But as long as there were beings willing to face those challenges together, willing to think beyond the limits of what seemed possible, willing to stand up for each other regardless of species or origin, the universe would endure. And it would thrive.